You're welcome to either close your eyes or set your gaze downward and go to this focal point of your body. And the reason we almost always start with the body as the focal point is because our body is present. What do you notice about the present moment through the sensations of your body? Foundation, support beneath you, sounds coming to you, breath coming and going. And we may notice these little judgments that come with it. Ooh, I like this feeling. Our mind starts like, I got great sleep last night. I didn't get great sleep last night. We start moving through away from the present. And then we just, oh, yeah, that's right. I'm just noticing presence through my body. Just spend a little time here. Can you notice the nuances of your breathing? Just that subtle shift as you move from an inhale into an exhale. And there's no stoppage. There's just a shift, this change moving into the next. Maybe you can notice that space between breaths as well. A little bit of softening that happens at the very bottom of the exhale. Just breath by breath, just noticing these shifts and changes that are happening just with your breath. Yeah. Again, just noticing breathing, that focal point of our body. And noticing how each breath comes in exactly the right moment. We can modulate our breath, we can shift it, we can encourage it, we can slow it down, we can speed it up. When our body is breathing for us, each inhale arrives at exactly the right time. Each exhale goes exactly in its own time. And there's this innate knowing we don't need to control our breath all the time, but we have access to shifting it on purpose when we need it. Perhaps bringing that idea of letting go of any control into our meditation practice. I don't need to feel a certain way. I don't need to get to a certain experience like calm. I'm just allowing these experiences to come and go as I sit. And when I notice a difficult experience, whether it's a thought that's coming, an emotion that's arising, an uncomfortable sensation in my physical body, it's meeting the moment with as much wisdom as I can rather than reacting. Is it necessary that I adjust my body, find a bit more support? How can I tend to this emotion or this thought that's bringing me this new experience? Just this encouragement when thoughts are coming or when a thought is quite sticky or grippy, just inviting your mind to soften the thought, the story, the words, and just come back to sensation. When I notice that difficulty in my mind, what does it do to my jaw? How does it affect my breathing? Let me just return to this focal point of the body. Just breath by breath. In breath by breath, moment by moment. As we stay with ourselves, just noticing thoughts rather than getting caught up in them. Sometimes we can get a little bored, a little dull. Our mind wants to move. We can get a little sleepy. Our mind wants to rest. And we're not trying to fight or push away these experiences, just noticing them as they come. But sometimes in our mind, we want to figure something out. We want to figure out a feeling. And the invitation is just to notice and experience the feeling. There's many tools that we can use. And the figuring out in our mind is really, really helpful. Reflecting so that we can learn. And sometimes we create space for that in our meditation. We have insight. We become newly aware of some thought pattern or some voice in our mind or some story that's arriving. And then in the midst of that movement in the mind, there's benefit, there's challenge, there's difficulty. We're just choosing moment to moment. Is it possible for me to come back to my breath right now, trusting my mind will remember what's important? Is it possible for me to come back to my breath right now, setting aside some difficulty in the mind, giving my mind permission to rest purposefully? And is it possible to practice some appreciation in the moment? And it's never to push away the difficulty. It's just this invitation. Can I experience the ease that comes with an exhale? Can I appreciate that I can hear a sound and almost immediately interpret what does that sound mean? And then is it possible to let go of the meaning and just be with the experience? And it's a subtle shift, letting the mind rest as the mind wants to name, oh, that sound is a bird, and that sound is this, and this feeling means this. And just coming back and practicing being with the feeling itself, the sound itself, noticing your breath coming and going. As we stay, just coming back to our breath again and again, noticing what's happening in the mind. This observation process is a big part of our meditation practice, just strengthening our ability to observe. And then with that observation, we have new awareness and we're choosing our response to the moment rather than reacting to the moments as they come. And it's subtle, it's a subtle shift. Sometimes I'm in a reaction and I'm 5 steps into it before I'm even aware of it. And my mind is telling me, I should be doing this different. I like this better. I don't like this. And we get caught in these loops where the mind just doesn't like something and we're a little bit resistant to the moment. And then we'll have these moments of ease, a bird song, a flower, some fresh breath. Feels lovely. And then perhaps the half a second, perhaps even before that fresh breath is over, the mind is back in its workings. And this Eightfold Noble Path we've been working with, these first 3 steps, so incredibly important. Working with our perception of the world, that's the first step. Working with our thoughts or our intentionality, that's the second step. Then working with our communication. And we're constantly communicating with ourselves. And what is that voice saying? Is it gentle? Is it tender? Is it kind? Are you talking to yourself as if you were talking to a dear friend? And as we work with this understanding, our viewpoint, our perception of the world, and our thinking mind, our intentionality as we've shown up, There's so many internal layers to that. And as we slow down and just be still with ourselves, we have an opportunity to learn, how is it that I'm seeing the world? And sometimes we have a lens of sadness on, and that affects how we see the world. It affects how we can receive. And that lens of sadness isn't meant to be pushed away, it just needs tending. We have phrases like rose colored glasses. Sometimes we name that as a good thing, sometimes we name that as a bad thing. But it's not good or bad, it just is. And when we can be aware, oh, this morning I've got rose colored glasses, everything looks beautiful. This morning there's some sorrow glasses on. And that means I need a bit of different tending than when the world is lovely and easeful. The first step is just the understanding itself. How am I seeing myself? And with that curiosity, we can start to notice, what's our intentionality? If my intention is to force myself to stay, to force myself to be good, to force myself to have an experience, we miss the experience. We're just inviting, showing up with tenderness, practicing meeting the moment with as much wisdom as we can. And that word wisdom, it's so big, but it is essentially presence. How can I meet this moment with the wisest part of myself, the kindest part of myself? From meeting ourselves where we are, remembering that we are enough, the moment is enough, remembering our breath is innately good, remembering to receive the breath, to let your body breathe for you, reminding your mind to rest. They're all just tools as we practice staying still. Sometimes when we slow down, our mind gets quite busy. And sometimes it's hard to get out of that busyness, especially if there's a gripping thought that's telling us something is wrong. And there's a lot of difficulty in the world. That is the first noble truth, which is the beginning of this eightfold noble path. It's just that difficulty exists. It is difficult being a human at times. And when we can remember that, we might remember to give ourselves grace. Everyone experiences this difficulty. Can we meet it with tenderness rather than more difficulty, forcefulness, judgment of ourselves? And there's a little phrase. This is from Brother Steindl Rast. He has a couple of books. He's in his late 80s now. And he spent his entire really work in his life looking at gratitude. And gratitude is often the beneficial view for the moment. And he says this, I love this phrase. This comes from a larger talk that he gave on gratitude in the midst of difficulty. And he said, you cannot be grateful for war. It's difficult, almost impossible, perhaps is impossible to be grateful for violence. You can't be grateful for sickness when you're sick. But there are many things we cannot be grateful for. But in every moment, you can choose gratitude. And I really appreciate that frame. For me, this reminder that we're not trying to be grateful in the moment for some hard thing that's happening, but we're looking for these windows, these tiny nanoseconds in time where we can appreciate. And a lot of times our mind is going to some memory of difficulty. Every once in a while, I get stuck. I'm guessing many of us do. We get stuck in the news or doom scrolling or reading about all of the challenges in the world. And then we forget the moment. In the moment of challenge, sometimes it's hard to find the gratitude, which is why we practice right now. We've set aside time to just be still with ourselves. The mind might be bringing difficulty. There might be some subtle experience of physical discomfort in the body. But in this moment, just the receiving of breath is the gratitude. So we're not trying to be grateful for some difficulty that's coming our way, but can we be grateful for our ability to see it? Can we be grateful for our ability to hear a bird song, even when our mind is telling us a difficult story? And a big part of this is just practicing unhooking from the stories in the mind. I think we've all experienced a moment where we look around and there's literally nothing wrong, but we might be feeling a lot of anxiety. We have these waves of emotion. Sorrow just hits us in the midst of a grocery shopping trip. Somebody says one small word and suddenly anger is here. And we're trying to meet those moments and make wise choices in those moments rather than pushing away, rather than trying to make ourselves feel calm. Just meeting that moment of anger or agitation. And instead of following the story in the mind, what is my body telling me? Do I feel tension in my chest? Did my hands tighten? And in the moment, softening, tending to the difficulty in the body, and then seeing, questioning, inviting. Is it possible to now just receive this next breath with appreciation? We'll share a short reading, a short poem here in a moment. Just this remembering, bringing our practice with us. So working with this idea of what is my perspective of the world? Can I be open to a new perspective? Remembering to watch our thoughts, pay attention to our intentionality. How am I showing up for myself? And as we speak to ourselves throughout the day, can it be with gentleness, with kindness, practicing allowing, practicing gratitude, practicing receiving whatever comes. This poem speaks a bit to the delights we feel. In the same moment, we might feel sorrow. And giving yourself permission to feel it all. It is a delight to feel. It is bliss to know this particular sorrow. I no longer fear that I will fall into the chasm and be swallowed whole by it, because I spent time here and found my heart here. I no longer fear I will be abandoned, alone, left for the buzzards and empty-eyed beings. I now know the only way I've been abandoned is by leaving my own heart. I cannot feel alone, for my heart is with me, and I with her. There is still grieving and sorrow and suffering and despair, no longer followed, though, by this thought, this is forever. Instead, my heart is saying, do not be afraid, for I am with you. Knowing I cannot be lost, knowing I can never be alone. The knowing in my body is not the same as the concrete rigidity of my mind. She is much softer, much wiser, much gentler, and with a strength beyond measure. It is a delight to feel my own heart. I invite you to bring your hands into any of your closing habits or practices. We'll end with a few loving kindness phrases. Instead of offering a well-wishing, so repeating the phrases back if they make sense for you. May I give myself permission to feel today? May I be open to fresh perspective? May I remember the innate goodness of my breath? And when action is needed, may I choose to move with ease and peace. Take your time. So whenever you feel complete, you can open your eyes, find a little movement. It's going slow if possible. As always, just take a moment to thank yourself. Bring your practice into the day with you, into the weekend with you. It's one breath at a time. Just remembering that whatever comes, can you meet it with that wise part of yourself that can observe? And just remembering your breath. Breath is always with you. Heart is always with you. Thank you for sharing your hearts. Thank you, Sangha.